For 30,000 years, Earth had been a silent world, forgotten by the very beings who once called it home. Far away in distant galaxies, humanity had built new homes, new empires, and new dreams, leaving behind a world they believed could no longer sustain life. Now, after so many centuries, adrift in the stars, a fleet of colossal ships floated at the edge of the Sol system, their hulls glinting in the light of a still-burning sun. Commander Lysa Kane stood at the bridge of the flagship Resolute Dawn, her heart pounding as Earth appeared on the main viewing screen, a blue jewel wrapped in wisps of white clouds, so breathtaking that for a moment, all she could do was stare. She had read about Earth in the old archives, had listened to the ancient songs and stories about the birthplace of humanity, but nothing could have prepared her for the real thing. Against all odds, Earth was alive. Not just alive, but beautiful. Yet something was wrong. Very wrong. The fleet's long-range scanners had picked up strange structures on the planet's surface, sprawling across continents that should have been wild and overgrown. Signals, not of human origin, pulsed from deep within the atmosphere. Satellite images revealed colossal hive-like towers, enormous bridges made of what looked like living bone, and dense forests that moved as if breathing. It was clear Earth had not remained empty. Something else had claimed it. Something alien. The officers around Lysa shifted nervously, exchanging worried glances. They had come prepared for a challenge: harsh weather, unstable ecosystems, perhaps even a few primitive species, but no one had expected this. Lysa clenched her fists behind her back, feeling the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders. Her ancestors had sworn that one day humanity would return to reclaim their home, to plant their feet once again in the soil of Earth and rebuild what was lost. But now, standing here, she realized they might have to fight for that right. The question was not whether Earth belonged to humanity in their hearts. It always had, but whether the current inhabitants would surrender it willingly. She ordered the fleet into high orbit, commanding the ships to stay out of firing range until they understood what they were facing. The silent world was no longer silent, and they would need to listen carefully before making their next move. Throughout the massive ship, excitement buzzed through the air, mixed with fear. Scientists and historians crowded into observation rooms, eager to study the new Earth, while soldiers polished their weapons, preparing for a war that had not yet begun. Lysa moved through the halls, her mind racing with possibilities. Could they negotiate with these creatures? Were they intelligent enough to understand diplomacy? Or would this end, like so many chapters in human history, in blood and fire? She didn't have answers yet, but she knew one thing with certainty: they could not turn back. Too many lives had been spent reaching this moment. Too many generations had dreamed of standing on Earth again. Failure was not an option. As the fleet completed its slow arc around the planet, they detected the first signs of organized resistance. Swarms of sleek, living ships rose from Earth's atmosphere, their surfaces glistening like black glass. They moved with terrifying coordination, forming a shield between the planet and the human fleet. On the comms channel, an eerie signal came through a sequence of sounds that resembled a heartbeat mixed with whispers. The scientists scrambled to decode the message, but its meaning remained elusive. Was it a warning? A threat? An invitation? No one knew. Tension gripped every soul aboard the Resolute Dawn. Lysa returned to the bridge, staring at the approaching swarm. They looked nothing like human ships. They were organic, pulsating with energy, as if grown rather than built. The sight was both fascinating and horrifying. "Commander," her communication officer said, voice tight with fear, "we're receiving another transmission. It's in their language." On the screen, a pattern of symbols appeared, swirling in mesmerizing patterns. Lysa felt an instinctive chill run down her spine. Whatever these beings were, they were not primitive. They were advanced, organized, and territorial. She glanced around the bridge at her officers, men and women who had trained their entire lives for this moment, and saw the same fear reflected in their eyes. But she also saw determination. Humanity had fled once. They would not flee again. The ships continued to drift closer, and the fleet held its position, weapons powered but not yet aimed. Lysa ordered a deep scan of the alien vessels. The results came back within minutes. The ships were alive, with hulls composed of complex organic tissue reinforced with unknown materials stronger than steel. Their weapon systems were unlike anything humans had encountered before, capable of projecting energy fields that could tear through conventional armor. Fighting them would be like fighting a nightmare made real. And yet, as she watched them maneuver with eerie grace, Lysa couldn't shake the feeling that they, too, were curious, wary, perhaps, but not immediately aggressive. Somewhere deep in her mind, an old lesson from the Academy surfaced: fear often leads to conflict, but understanding can lead to peace. Could it be possible that these beings were not enemies, but caretakers? Had they found Earth abandoned and healed it, nurtured it back to life while humanity struggled to survive among the stars? The thought was almost unbearable. To imagine that humans had given up on their home, only for strangers to save it, cut deep into their pride. But pride could not be their guide now. Lysa knew they had to be smarter, better than the ancestors who had once scorched the skies and poisoned the seas. As the two forces hung in tense silence above the sleeping planet, time seemed to stretch endlessly. Every heartbeat echoed like a drum in the ears of the fleet. No one spoke. No one moved. The fate of Earth hung in the balance, a fragile thread strung between two civilizations, each born from the same universe, but shaped by different paths. Lysa took a deep breath, feeling the enormity of the moment settle over her. This was not just about reclaiming a world. It was about proving that humanity had learned something after 30,000 years. She stepped forward, her voice steady, and gave the order that would define the future: open a channel. Let's see if they're willing to talk before we give them a reason to fight. And in that moment, as the bridge crew worked frantically to establish contact, Lysa Kane realized something else: Earth itself was watching them. The forests, the oceans, the winds, all were witnesses to this meeting of old and new. And though the planet said nothing, its silent judgment weighed heavier than any weapon. Humanity had returned to the cradle of its beginning, but whether they were worthy to stay remained a question only the future could answer. The moment the human fleet entered high orbit around Earth, the truth became impossible to deny: this was no longer the world they had left behind. From the frozen poles to the burning equator, Earth had been reshaped by hands that were not human. Giant structures grew out of the land like the bones of ancient gods, twisting toward the sky, covered in a living material that shimmered under the sunlight. Vast rivers, wider than anything found in the old records, snaked through endless forests where trees the size of mountains stretched their green arms high into the clouds. Plains that were once dry and dead now buzzed with vibrant energy, and oceans glowed faintly at night with life forms unknown to any human eye. The old cities had been swallowed by nature and something else: creatures that had woven themselves into the heart of the world. These were the Exernath, and Earth was no longer just their home, it was their kingdom. As Commander Lysa Kane stood at the main viewing screen of the Resolute Dawn, she could not help but feel a deep unease settle in her chest. This was not the return she had imagined. Humanity had dreamed of reclaiming Earth for so long, but no one had ever considered that they might have to fight for it against those who had already made it their own. Signals flickered across the fleet's communication systems, strange and complex, like songs sung underwater. The scientists worked frantically to translate them, but progress was slow. Meanwhile, the alien ships that had risen from Earth's surface formed a tight net between the planet and the human fleet, their living hulls gleaming like polished stone. They did not attack, but their message was clear: come no closer. The fleet's captains argued in private channels, some demanding a show of strength, others urging caution. Lysa listened carefully but said little. She had seen enough history to know how easily fear could trigger a war. She ordered reconnaissance drones to be launched, each one designed to map the surface without disturbing it. The images they returned were astonishing. Entire continents were now massive hive ecosystems, a delicate balance of technology and biology. Massive spires pulsed with internal light, and everywhere there were signs of intelligent design: bridges, canals, tunnels, but all grown rather than built. It was as if Earth itself had become a living organism, and the Exernath were its caretakers. Yet for all the beauty, there was danger too. In the deep jungles, Predators larger than tanks prowled, their skins armored like battleships. In the skies, winged creatures bigger than any known bird soared through the air, their eyes flashing with an unnatural light. The Exernath had not only reshaped Earth, they had rearmed it. And humanity was an intruder. A council was called aboard the Resolute Dawn, gathering the fleet's most powerful leaders. Some spoke passionately about negotiation, about the possibility of sharing the planet with the Exernath. Others demanded immediate military action, arguing that Earth belonged to humanity by birthright, no matter who lived there now. Lysa sat at the head of the long metal table, listening, weighing every word. Deep down, she knew that diplomacy would be almost impossible. History had shown that two species could not easily share one world, especially when both saw it as their home. As the debate raged, another signal came through. This time, it was different, a focused transmission, aimed directly at the fleet. A single image flashed on every screen, a human hand reaching out, not in peace, but in warning, with sharp alien claws just inches away. The message was unmistakable. Earth was claimed. Any attempt to take it would be met with resistance. The council fell silent. Some saw the image as an invitation to prove their strength. Others saw it as a death sentence. Lysa rose from her seat and made her decision. A small team would land on Earth, not to fight, but to understand. If there was even a small chance to avoid war, they had to try. The landing was swift and silent. Lysa and her team touched down in what was once Europe, near the ruins of an ancient human city. Only fragments of stone and metal remained, overgrown with thick vines that moved gently as if breathing. The air was rich with strange scents, and the ground seemed almost warm under their boots. As they moved carefully through the landscape, they realized that the Exernath had not simply occupied Earth, they had healed it. The air was cleaner than any found on the human colonies. The soil was richer. The rivers were pure. Life thrived everywhere they looked. It was a painful discovery. Humans had abandoned Earth at its darkest hour, poisoned and broken, while the Exernath had saved it. As they moved deeper into the ruins, they found more signs of the new rulers of Earth. Giant stone statues stood in silent vigil, their insect-like faces both terrifying and majestic. Enormous banners of woven silk hung from the crumbling towers, each painted with symbols that spoke of history and pride. It was clear that the Exernath saw themselves not as invaders, but as saviors. Lysa's heart ached with the weight of this realization. Humanity had fled, but the Exernath had stayed. And in doing so, they had earned a claim that could not be easily dismissed. Suddenly, movement flickered in the shadows. Lysa froze, signaling her team to take cover. From the thick mists emerged a group of Exernath warriors, their armor grown from their own bodies, their weapons extensions of their limbs. They moved with fluid grace, every step calculated, every breath controlled. But they did not attack. Instead, they stood in silent formation, watching the humans with eyes that gleamed like molten gold. Lysa stepped forward slowly, raising her hands in a universal gesture of peace. For a long, terrible moment, no one moved. Then, one of the Exernath lowered its weapon and tilted its head, studying her with something almost like curiosity. A low hum filled the air, not threatening, but filled with ancient power. In that instant, Lysa understood something crucial. The Exernath did not fear humanity. They respected strength, but they also respected wisdom. If humans came with arrogance and violence, they would be destroyed. But if they came with understanding, there might be a path forward. She bowed her head slightly, a risk, a show of trust. Behind her, her team held their breath. And then, slowly, the leading Exernath stepped aside, leaving the path open. It was not an invitation. It was a test. Heart pounding, Lysa led her team forward, knowing that every step they took would decide the fate of their species. They were walking into the unknown, into a world that was once theirs but had been reborn without them. The silent forests, the glowing rivers, the towering hives all whispered a single truth: Earth belonged to the strong, the wise, the worthy. And humanity would have to prove, not with weapons, but with actions, that they deserved to call it home once more. Far above, in the cold vastness of orbit, the human fleet waited, watching, ready to unleash devastation at the first sign of failure. But for now, there was only silence, and the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, the children of Earth could find their way back into the heart of the world that had never truly forgotten them. The ruins stretched as far as the eye could see, broken skeletons of skyscrapers jutting out of the ground like the bones of dead giants, a silent testament to a civilization that had once ruled the Earth with fire, steel, and dreams too heavy to bear. Commander Lysa Kane moved carefully through the crumbled remains of what had once been called New York City, though now it was just another nameless graveyard swallowed by vines and the endless gray mist that curled around every broken wall and twisted street. Her boots kicked up ash with every step, a reminder that the old world had not fallen peacefully but had burned itself out in fury and desperation, leaving only dust behind. Around her, her small team moved quietly, their faces grim, scanning for signs of life or hidden dangers, but the only sounds were the distant call of strange creatures and the whisper of the wind through shattered windows. Above them, the sky hung heavy with dark clouds, and every now and then, streaks of green lightning cracked the heavens, casting the ruined city in ghostly light. It was clear that humanity had not simply abandoned Earth, it had destroyed itself first, and the Exernath had simply inherited what was left. The team's scanners pinged softly, detecting pockets of energy deep beneath the rubble, remnants of old technology still clinging to existence like faint stars dying in the night. Lysa ordered a careful approach, her instincts screaming caution. Anything that had survived 30,000 years in this place would not be safe or simple. They moved deeper into the ruins, weaving through collapsed highways and broken monuments, past statues so worn by time that their faces had disappeared. Here and there, they saw the remains of old battles, rusted tanks, half buried in the earth, skeletal figures still gripping ancient weapons, their empty eye sockets staring eternally into nothingness. It was a graveyard not just of bodies, but of pride, ambition, and failure. The deeper they went, the more the weight of history pressed down on them, and it became harder to breathe, not from the atmosphere, which was rich and clean, but from the invisible pressure of regret. Then they found it, a great vault buried beneath what had once been a government building, its entrance sealed by layers of thick metal and stone. The scanners confirmed massive power readings from within, something old but still alive, still waiting. Lysa hesitated. The vault had survived the end of the old world. What secrets it contained could change everything. She gave the order to cut through the entrance, and her engineers moved quickly, setting up plasma torches to burn through the ancient locks. As the metal melted away, a low hum filled the air, a vibration that rattled their teeth and made their bones ache. Something inside the vault was waking up. The final barrier fell with a heavy groan, and beyond it lay a darkness so complete it seemed almost solid. Lights pierced the gloom, revealing a vast chamber filled with machinery, pods, and giant banks of servers still humming faintly with stored energy. In the center of the room stood a single chair. In that chair sat a figure perfectly still. They approached cautiously. The figure was human, or at least it had been once. Its body was a mix of flesh and machine, wires running from its spine into the floor, its eyes closed, its chest rising and falling with slow, mechanical precision. Around it, holographic screens floated in the air, displaying maps of Earth, lists of genetic codes, battle strategies, and endless lines of unreadable data. This was no ordinary survivor. It was a relic of the old world, a guardian, a weapon perhaps, left behind to protect secrets too dangerous to be lost. As Lysa moved closer, the figure's eyes snapped open, glowing a deep, unnatural blue. The team raised their weapons instinctively, but Lysa held up a hand. The figure spoke, its voice a mixture of human warmth and cold machine precision. "You are not the ones I was programmed to expect," it said. "You are too late." The words hung in the air like a curse. Lysa stepped forward, forcing herself to remain calm. She explained who they were, how humanity had left Earth and now returned, but the figure only shook its head slowly, a grim smile touching its cracked lips. It told them that Earth's fall had not been a single event, but a slow, rotting decay, 1,000 mistakes compounded over generations until the planet itself had turned against its creators. When the final wars had come, humanity had unleashed weapons so terrible that even the oceans boiled and the sky bled. The figure had been part of a last, desperate plan to preserve knowledge, to protect the genetic seeds of life, to wait for a time when Earth could be reborn. But the plan had failed. Humanity had not returned in time, and in their absence, the planet had healed itself in ways no one could have predicted. The Exarnath were not conquerors, the figure said. They were summoned. Lysa frowned, confusion tightening in her chest. The figure explained that the final weapon humanity had unleashed had not just destroyed cities and poisoned air, it had torn open the very fabric of life itself, sending a call out into the stars. The Exarnath had heard the call, had come to Earth not to destroy but to heal, to reshape what was broken. They had bonded with the damaged biosphere, becoming one with it, and now, after thousands of years, they were its true guardians. Humanity's claim to Earth was not just weak, it was obsolete. The old world had burned itself to ashes, and from those ashes had risen something new, something beyond human understanding. Lysa felt a cold knot form in her stomach. The mission to reclaim Earth had always been painted as noble, righteous, inevitable. But standing here, in the ashes of the old world, faced with the reality of their ancestors' failures, she saw the terrible truth. They were not returning heroes. They were intruders. The figure leaned forward slightly, wires tightening around its body like living vines. It warned them that any attempt to seize Earth by force would end in disaster. The planet would reject them. The Exarnath would not allow their healing work to be undone. There was still a choice to find a new way, to seek coexistence, to abandon the dreams of conquest, but time was running out. The Exarnath were patient, but not endlessly so. Lysa thanked the figure, though the words felt hollow in her mouth. As they left the vault, sealing it behind them, she looked out across the ruins once more, the skeletal remains of a civilization that had once believed itself eternal, and she understood that if humanity made the same mistakes again, there would be no second chance. High above, the fleet waited, powerful and ready, but for the first time, Lysa wondered if strength alone would be enough. The ashes of the old world still whispered warnings to those who would listen, and in the distance, beneath the rolling clouds, the Exarnath watched in silence, guardians of a world reborn, ready to defend their new home against the ghosts of a forgotten past. The council room aboard the Resolute Dawn buzzed with tension as the highest-ranking officers of the human fleet gathered to decide the future of their race, their faces carved with grim lines and their eyes hardened by the weight of history, knowing that whatever choice they made today would echo through the next 1,000 years. Commander Lysa Kane stood at the head of the long black table, feeling the heavy pull of two impossible futures pulling her apart. One path demanded humanity, stand and fight, reclaiming Earth by force and blood, and the other whispered of caution, of diplomacy, of risking weakness in the face of those who already called Earth their home. The reports from the vault weighed heavily on every mind. The Exarnath were not mere trespassers, they were the saviors of a planet humanity had abandoned, the heirs to a world reborn from ashes. Yet pride ran deep in human veins, a stubborn refusal to surrender what was once theirs, even if their own ancestors had shattered it first. General Hockey slammed his fist onto the table, his voice sharp with anger as he demanded action, insisting that Earth was humanity's by birthright, by blood, by history, and that no alien race, no matter how noble or powerful, could erase that claim. Others argued for patience, warning that a full-scale war against the Exarnath, against a planet that itself now fought alongside them, would not only be a slaughter, but a betrayal of what humanity was supposed to become. Lysa listened, silent and still, her mind spinning faster than any voice around her, thinking of the ruins they had walked through, the warnings of the ancient guardian, and the eyes of the Exarnath warriors, not cruel, not savage, but fierce protectors, beings who understood loss and pain in ways humanity seemed to have forgotten. Still, there were voices louder than reason, and within hours, the council reached a grim decision. Earth would be challenged, a demonstration of strength, a signal that humanity had returned not as beggars, but as rulers. A message would be sent to the surface, a demand for recognition of human sovereignty over the planet, and if the Exarnath refused, then the fleet would strike. The message was prepared with cold, formal precision, carrying the full authority of the fleet and humanity's surviving governments, a relic of a system that had long ago crumbled into dust, but whose name still carried power. As the transmission was sent, the fleet shifted into battle formations, their great engines burning bright against the dark sky, their weapons armed and ready, gleaming like the teeth of a hungry beast. Hours passed in suffocating silence, and every second stretched the nerves tighter, until finally a response came from Earth, a simple image flashing across every ship's screen, showing the planet's vast forests, its endless oceans, its reborn deserts, and in the center, the towering hive cities of the Exarnath, each one pulsing with life. No words were needed. The meaning was clear. Earth had chosen its protectors, and it was not the species that had once nearly killed it. The attack began with precision strikes, aimed at disabling Exarnath defense grids and clearing landing zones, and for a few brief moments, it seemed the old human power was enough to tear through the planet's shield. But Earth was no longer the passive cradle humanity remembered. The land itself fought back, unleashing storms of burning plasma from the hives, sending giant living machines surging into the skies, creatures of bone and steel and fury that tore through human ships with horrifying speed. The oceans rose in massive waves, crashing into landing crafts and swallowing them whole. Forests twisted into massive tendrils, ripping apart anything that dared set foot upon them. Within minutes, the clean and brutal war the humans had planned descended into chaos. Commander Lysa Kane, aboard the Resolute Dawn, watched in horror as ship after ship fell from orbit, their flaming wreckage painting the atmosphere with streaks of sorrow. The Exarnath did not fight like any enemy humanity had ever known. They were not simply soldiers, they were one with the planet, and every blade of grass, every drop of rain, every gust of wind became their weapon. Still, humanity was stubborn. Fleets reformed, regrouped, and hammered the surface with everything they had, but it was like trying to drain an ocean with a bucket. For every hive they destroyed, two more rose from the ground. For every creature they killed, the soil birthed another. The earth itself rejected them, and it became clear that no amount of firepower could reclaim what had already chosen a new master. In the heart of the battle, Lisa received an urgent message from the surface, a distress call from one of the forward teams who had managed to break through and reach a hive city's outer walls. Their transmission was chaotic, filled with screams and the sound of weapons fire, but one word stood out among the static: surrender. Against all odds, the Exarnath had captured human soldiers alive, and rather than execute them, had offered them terms. Not terms of defeat, but terms of coexistence, a chance to build something new instead of burying the old in another layer of ash. It was a shocking revelation, one that spread through the fleet like wildfire, challenging the anger and pride that had driven them into war. Lysa made her choice. Overriding General Hoxie's furious objections, she ordered a ceasefire, pulling the fleet back into high orbit, out of range of the living planet's rage. She opened a channel to the Exarnath, offering herself as an envoy, not a conqueror, willing to listen, willing to learn. The response was not immediate. Hours passed in crushing silence, during which Lysa wondered if she had signed her own death warrant. But then, a reply came, an invitation to meet at the heart of Earth's rebirth, in the first hive city ever grown from the ashes of the old world. The journey down was unlike any landing Lysa had ever made. There were no weapons pointed at her, no soldiers lining the streets. Instead, vast fields of glowing flowers waved gently in the wind, and towering trees formed archways under which she walked. The hive city itself was a marvel, a fusion of nature and design that made her breath catch in her throat. The Exarnath were waiting, tall, armored, magnificent, and in their leader's eyes, she saw not hatred but a weary hope, as if they too were tired of endless battles. The negotiations were difficult, filled with sharp words and long silences, but both sides understood the deeper truth. Survival meant more than winning. It meant changing. And so, humanity gave its answer, not with bombs or fire, but with a pledge. They would not erase the past, but they would not be its slaves either. Together with the Exarnath, they would build a new future, one rooted not in the ashes of failure, but in the living soil of a healed Earth. It was not the future anyone had imagined, but it was the future they needed. As the first agreements were signed under the open sky, with Earth itself bearing silent witness, Lissa felt something stir in her heart, something fierce and fragile and beautiful. Humanity had found its place, not as rulers of a dead world, but as stewards of a living one. The old world was gone, burned and broken, but from its ashes, a new story would rise. The first light of the new Earth spilled over the horizon like a gentle promise, brushing the sky with colors humanity had not seen in generations, and as the sunlight bathed the reborn lands, Commander Lissa Kane stood silently atop a grassy hill, watching a world that was no longer hers, yet somehow more beautiful than any she had ever dreamed of. Around her, a group of human settlers moved carefully, planting new seeds in rich soil that had once been poisoned by their ancestors' hands, now healed by the strange partnership between human will and Exarnath wisdom. The hive cities in the distance shimmered like living mountains, blending seamlessly with the forests and rivers, a breathtaking sight that reminded every human who saw it that Earth was not a prize to be won, but a home to be respected. Yet beneath the beauty, the tension still lingered like faint cracks in a mirror. Not everyone had accepted the fragile peace, and there were whispers among the fleet, dark murmurs of betrayal, of weakness, of a second chance, slipping away because humanity had not fought hard enough. Liza knew the real struggle was only just beginning. The Council of Renewal, as they now called it, met each day beneath a vast tree whose roots wound deep into the earth and whose branches touched the sky, a symbol of the new alliance between two species that had once seemed destined to destroy each other. Representatives of the Exarnath stood beside human leaders, speaking in low, resonant voices about the future they must build together, a future balanced on a knife's edge. Old habits died hard, and many humans found it difficult to see the Exarnath as equals, let alone friends, while some Exarnath harbored doubts about the humans' ability to change their destructive nature. Trust was a slow-growing thing, fragile and easily broken, and every decision made felt like walking across thin ice. But there was hope too, fierce and stubborn, burning in the hearts of those who had seen too much death and wanted something better. Lysa had become one of the loudest voices for unity, her speeches filled with raw honesty about humanity's mistakes and her determination to make sure the same horrors would never happen again. Still, not all wounds could be healed with words. As the weeks turned into months, strange incidents began to occur: storage caches raided, communication lines cut, weapons stolen from fleet armories. Investigations pointed to a rogue faction within humanity, a group that called themselves the True Sons, who believed the alliance with the Exarnath was a betrayal of their ancestors' sacrifice. They saw Earth not as a shared home, but as a symbol of lost power they were determined to reclaim by any means necessary. Whispers of an uprising grew louder with each passing day, and soon the council had no choice but to act. Lysa was tasked with rooting out the insurgents, a mission that tore at her soul, for she knew that these rebels were not monsters, they were people filled with fear, anger, and the unbearable weight of loss. But allowing their hatred to fester would doom everything they had fought to create. The hunt for the True Sons led Lysa deep into the heart of the wild lands, places where the old cities had been swallowed entirely by the Earth's rebirth, where ruins stood like forgotten gods and nature ruled with quiet, ruthless power. Her team moved carefully through the broken remnants of the old world, scanning for signs of human life, tracking stolen supplies and coded messages hidden among the ruins. The deeper they went, the stranger the land became, with trees that whispered secrets in the wind and rivers that glowed faintly under the stars. It was in one of these ancient sacred places that they finally found the insurgents, a hidden camp nestled inside the crumbling shell of an ancient stadium, where once crowds had cheered and roared, now silent except for the voices of those plotting rebellion. The confrontation was swift and brutal. Words were tried first, Lysa pleading with the insurgents to stand down, to see that Earth could be theirs again, if they chose to share it instead of spilling more blood. But pride and fear are not easily defeated, and soon weapons were drawn, and the stadium echoed once more with the sounds of battle. It was a hard, ugly fight, brother against brother, sister against sister, and when it was over, the ground was stained with sorrow. Many insurgents surrendered, seeing the futility of their cause, but others lay silent, their dreams of conquest shattered under the open sky. Lysa stood among the fallen, her heart heavy, knowing that victory had come at a terrible cost. Returning to the Hive cities, Lysa was met with both gratitude and suspicion. The Exerneth honored her bravery, but warned that humanity's anger was a fire that could easily flare again if not carefully tended. The council voted to increase joint patrols, to blend human and Exerneth forces together, not just for security, but to build bonds of trust through shared duty. Slowly, cautiously, the new world began to take shape. Fields were planted, homes were built, schools were opened where children of both species learned side by side, laughing in languages still strange to each other, but filled with the same light. Ancient libraries were rebuilt with knowledge salvaged from before the fall, but this time the lessons of history were etched into every stone, reminders of the price of arrogance and the power of humility. As the first year of the new era came to a close, a great celebration was held beneath the Mother Tree, where humans and Exernath alike gathered to honor the past and embrace the future. Lysa watched from the edge of the crowd, her heart filled with a bittersweet pride. She thought of the cities lost to fire, the skies once blackened by war, and the silent ruins they had walked through, and she knew that the path ahead would not be easy. But for the first time in generations, it would be walked together. As the stars came out above the gathering, brighter and closer than she had ever seen them, Lysa whispered a silent promise to the earth and to those who had come before. They would not fail again. Humanity had given its answer, and Earth had accepted it. This was not the end. It was the beginning of a new dawn, born from ashes, carried on hope, and built with hands that no longer sought to conquer but to create.